Hi guys, happy Wednesday. Today's Wednesday, June 3rd, and this is your video you're going to watch today. This is Mrs. Fates. We are going to be talking about comparing rational numbers, but before we do that, let's do some review very quickly about our symbols. Our symbols are definitely going to come up in this IXL strand, and we're going to want to make sure we understand which symbol to use when we pick the correct symbol when we're comparing numbers. So we've got our more than symbol, and remember, if you remember from a couple weeks ago, this symbol, we want to make sure that it's facing the correct way. So if you learned back in 5th grade, I always thought of it as a Pac-Man mouth or an alligator mouth. It's always going to eat the bigger number. So if we're just talking about basic whole numbers right now, I know 10 is greater than 1. So obviously that would be the more than symbol. The less than symbol, and I think Miss Henderson spoke about this when she did her video, if you were to tilt that symbol upright, it looks like the letter L for less than. So if I were to take this symbol and turn it upright, it looks like the letter L. And again, if you put your basic whole numbers in there, we know that 0 is less than 4. All right, and then obviously we know our equal to symbol. Any number can be equal as long as it is its identical number. So for example, I know, and I'm going to use a rational number, I know if I write 3.5 as a decimal, I know it's equivalent to the fraction or the mixed number 3.5. Okay, so we got to be careful that we don't get tricked on those because they're going to show up on IXL today. All right, so let's go over some basic things. Knowing that these are the symbols that we have to kind of have down. Any positive number will always be larger than a negative number. So when you get to the strands on IXL, some examples, we know that a larger number is always going to trump a negative number. And actually, it's got to be a positive number. Yeah, so a positive number is always going to be larger than its negative number. And I think we know that. We know that from just going up the grade levels in math. All right, so then if I look at example A, I know that some of us might get freaked out seeing that fraction, but if you look closely, it's got a negative symbol in front of it. And I know that, again, a positive number, we're not going to see a plus sign in front of a positive number. They're just our basic numbers with no symbol. I know that that is going to be larger than negative 3/4, so I'm using the more than symbol. So if I read this from left to right, I know 5 is more than negative 3/4. All right, so now I'm going to do the next one. I have negative 1.5 blank 4. So, again, I know any positive number is always going to be larger than a negative number, but now my symbol is going to go this way because the mouth is eating the bigger number. 4 is positive, negative 1.5 is negative, and I do have this number line below us. Think of drawing or sketching a number line when you're doing these problems if you get stuck or you're confused. And I'm going to actually use the number line for the next question because now I have 2 negative numbers. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually plot both of them on my number line, and I'm going to see which one is the closest to 0. When you're comparing 2 negative numbers, the number that is the closest to 0 is larger, because if I'm moving in this direction from negative to positive, I know the further right I move, the number is going to be larger. Okay, so I'm going to plot negative 1.5. I know negative 1.5 falls halfway between negative 1 and negative 2. And then I'm going to plot in a different color negative 2.5. Well, I know that comes halfway between negative 2 and negative 3. So instantly right now, I know that my first value of negative 1.5 is larger than negative 2.5. All right, so now I've taken examples from F2, and we're going to go through them. So again, if you need to draw a number line, go for it. Which sign makes the statement true? So you are either going to pick, and I'll go back up to the top, you're picking one of these signs. You're either picking the more than sign, the less than sign, or the equal to sign. So keep those in mind. All right, so here we go. I know 5/8 blank 4.5. Well, this is a mixed number, all right? 5/8 is smaller than 1, so I know that automatically 4.5 is larger. It's going to get that symbol because when I'm reading from left to right, 5/8 is less than 4.5. All right, another easy one. I hope we get this. 1 5/10, question mark, 1 5/10. Notice how I said it the same way. Just because this has a 0 here, I could add a 0 on that side too, and I know that these are both equal, okay? Also, IXL is going to try to do this, and I think I talked about this before. Are these the same? One's a decimal, one's a fraction. They're both rational numbers, so I know that they're equal. So just don't get tricked on those types of problems. All right, so now we've got two negative rational numbers. I've got a fraction, -4/5, which is I know is less than, okay, -1. And I've got -4. So again, I have my number line here. I'm actually just going to, over to the side, plot both of these. I'll plot -4 here, because that's, I think, the more obvious one. And I'll plot -4/5 in blue. I know -4/5 is going to fall. Well, I know -5/5 is the same thing as -1. So I know -4/5 is just going to be right before -1. So now, which one is closer to 0? And I know that -4/5 is closer to 0, so my symbol is going to eat the larger number. All right, next one. I've got -4 9/10, and I've got -4 6/10. Again, if you were to plot these, now here's my number. I'm going to plot -4.9. -4.9 is going to fall between -4 and -5, and I know it's going to be literally a hair before that -5. Well, I know -4.6, I'll plot it in yellow, is going to be, well, if here's -4.5, -4.6 is about there. So these two are super, super close. But again, you have to be careful. Which one is closest to 0? And if I zoom this in, well, I know my yellow dot, which was -4.6, is going to be larger. It's closer to 0. And I think that's the trickiest part when you're comparing two negative numbers. Just keep that in mind and use the number line to help you. All right, let's look at the next one. I've got -5 blank -1/2. So I'm going to plot -5, easy. It's going to be a negative whole number. And now, if I think about where -1/2 is, I know it's going to fall halfway. It's not going to be -1. It's going to fall halfway between 0 and -1. That's -1/2. And if I look right now, which value is larger? Well, I know it's closer to 0. Is that -1/2? So I know that is going to be larger. So the mouth is eating the bigger number. But if I were to read this from left to right, it's going to be -5 is less than -1/2. So I pulled some examples from the IXL strand. Now you're going to go complete IXL 6th grade P.2 and 80% SMART score. And again, draw the number line. I think that is the easiest way to do some of these, especially if you get stuck. And then obviously don't get tricked on equivalent numbers that are both rational, obviously, and one's a decimal and one's a fraction. And if you need assistance on a problem, you can always get a hold of Miss Henderson or myself, or go back and watch this video. All right, guys, have a good one.